The incomparable Justin Kenny, the ingenious Glenn Marini. I may be giving us too much credit there.
Not at all.
But now we are in week 3 here on the Highlight Zone, so we've not only gotten a first impression, we've kind of got a follow-up impression and maybe have a better idea of what we're going to see throughout the fall here in the high school football season. Through 2 weeks, what's your biggest takeaway?
Well, I think we look like geniuses purely because who had Snider 2-0 right now? I mean, right here, right?
This is true. We had them. We had them pretty starting off pretty well, and they've looked absolutely unbeatable. I'll say.
Yes, they have, and you know, consider the competition because Northside's Northside, but the way they just absolutely demolished Carroll was just eye-opening. And I think while we expected them to be the best team in the SAC, maybe even by a considerable margin, I think even us have to be a little bit surprised at just how dominant they have looked through first 2 weeks.
That was scary defensively, what they were able to do on the defensive side of the football on Friday night.
And we thought that would be the case. We just didn't know it would be that dominant. I mean, that middle part of that defense at all 3 levels is just so dangerous, so big. And across the conference right now, it's just a lot of teams that you go, well, they're not as big as usual. Homestead, Carroll, and Snider's just massive. And there's just nobody in the conference right now that you look across this board that is big enough to compete with them in the trenches on either side.
Well, 2 teams that have started off well and hope they're competing for an SAC championship when it's all said and done. Luers and Homestead, they're going to meet here in week 3. It'll be our Highlight Zone game of the week. What have you seen from both of these teams? Because both have explosive offenses, both have players that can make plays happen offensively, and both have really played. Luers hasn't played perfect football. I was out there early against Wayne. They made some mistakes in that one and let Wayne back in that game. But they played pretty good football thus far.
Can we deem this the Presley Bowl?
The Presley Bowl. Oh, my God. I wasn't going to put it all on a high school kid, but yes, in some ways it is.
Yeah, you know, Luers has been very impressive. Then we go back and look and go, oh, that week 1 win against Carroll, you know, maybe just to look a little bit better before last week. It's very difficult. But 2 teams that I think are right there in the mix for the second best team in the SAC between Luers, DeWanger, and Homestead right now. So a good indication on Friday night how this game goes.
Jaya Wright, I think if you had to pick an MVP at this point of the season, so many guys on Snider, you could take a guy off that team, I think. And Lawrence Johnson's obviously fantastic. I'm trying to think. Christian Covington has played very well on the offensive side of football, although hasn't played in really second halves because they haven't really needed him. If there was an MVP right now, I think it would have to be Jaya Wright, just based on the numbers he's put up and what he's been asked to do with a relatively new role of playmakers around him and an offensive line that's completely
No, absolutely. I think you look at that wide receiver core, and they're solid, but nobody spectacular in there. Nobody like a Ben Skoranek or anybody like that in there. And then you look at the running backs who are also trying to acclimate themselves. It's a younger running back core without Jordan Presley. So you have to look at Jaya Wright and say definitely he is the MVP right now through 2 weeks because of what he's been able to do with a relatively new group around him. You have to think as the season progresses, that offense is just going to get stronger and stronger.
It looks like Trevin Taylor's the red zone guy, maybe. He's been making big plays. Grant Raber's kind of steady and consistent. The Julian Edelman, if you will.
Yeah, sure. Minus the ACL.
He's got both ACLs working, so Grant Raber has a little bit on Julian Edelman this week.
Definitely.
Which is a good thing. Conrad Kazai, the Layton kid, they've had some guys really step up into those roles. But as far as Homestead goes, how do you corral what Bishop Luers has offensively? Obviously, Presley's going to be juiced for this game, but I was out watching Luers the other day. It isn't just Presley; it's Gaston is a bigger weapon, I think, than people are giving him credit.
Definitely.
I really thought that defense flew around against Wayne, made plays in the backfield. It might be doesn't have the Jalen Smith star power, but a really solid defense for Luers. What do you do to counter the speed and athleticism what Luers brings?
Well, it's difficult because even without Ty Hambright, they were really able to dominate for 3+ quarters against Wayne last week. So you look at a Bishop Luers team that's playing with a lot of confidence right now. They do not have very many injuries. I think that's what derailed them the last couple years because they really don't have a lot of depth, but they do have incredible talent in the front line, front 22. So you look at it in terms of what Luers has to do against Homestead, maybe similar to what they do to get against Carroll, because Carroll, 6A team, a lot of depth, and Luers was just really able to pick them apart. So do we see a similar game plan? I'm not sure.
How do you see this one going? Who do you see coming up victorious on Friday?
I got to go with Luers just because of their skill players really dominating thus far through the first 2 weeks, and they were able to really derail what Carroll likes to do defensively week 1, did the same thing to Wayne in week 2. So Luers right now, even with Ty Hambright still a question mark, I think you have to pick them because you mentioned Jordan Presley, we mentioned Justin Gaston. I mean, the talent they have, Camden Childers is an emerging guy at wide receiver. So you look at that Homestead defense and you're like, can they contain that Luers offense? And other than Tico Brown, it's a lot of question marks still trying to figure out that next group of Homestead top defenders. And I don't think we know yet. I don't think they know yet. So they have a tremendous challenge on Friday.
Yeah, I think Cam Shannon is one of those up-and-comers that I think
definitely.
we're going to hear a lot about by the end of the season. I would pick Homestead simply because I was on the fence 50-50, and you picked Luers. So I think that's really just a wise way to go about it.
One of us could come back and go, all right,
we told you so. We told you so. No, Jaya Wright is playing fantastic football. He's a load. Homestead's not beating itself, and that's a key. And, Luers had some early turnovers in that game the other day against Wayne. They can't afford it when they go up against a team that's not going to beat themselves and turn the ball over themselves, which would be Homestead at this point.
And you make a good point in terms of quarterbacks. Jack Miguel is solid at Carroll, but he really hasn't shined yet. And you look at Brandon Young over at Wayne, really not a guy that's really slinging it like Jaya Wright. So this is the first real big quarterback test, in my opinion, for Luers coming up.
Agreed. Carroll is at North. Dwenger is at Southside. Snider is at Concordia. Wayne is at Northrop. I'm really intrigued about two of those matchups. Snider at Concordia, just to see how Snider stays sharp, I guess you could say, after what is a historic performance, which is saying a lot considering the history of their program.
Yeah.
And then Wayne at Northrop. I think we have to see. We've talked about the potential that Wayne has. They beat Northrop. One of their 2 wins last year was a 1-point win against Northrop. How much progress have they made? And then on the flip side, we talk about the progress that Northside has made. How much progress have they made, even dealing with some injuries? I think we're going to see on Friday night.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of games in the SAC that maybe look lopsided on paper, though we'll find out a lot about some teams. And you mentioned a Northside team, Northrop too, Wayne. I mean, those are all teams that are trying to get traction, especially Wayne. We sit here 0-2 when we expected so much out of them, but it was a very big challenge for them coming out of the gate, so facing the Bishops. So how do they recover? You have to think they got to get a win here soon, or else the kids start checking out mentally and stuff, and then it just starts steamrolling. So I think it's a big week for Wayne.
When watching them play, they got to get it out of their own way, man. It's turnovers, bad snaps, fumble snaps, penalties. We talked about it last week. Wayne, you can see it in Wayne. They just got to play a better brand of football.
Yeah, and that's the next step. And we've talked about it before. Getting talent is the first step. Getting that talent to execute to the level that you need to beat the better teams in the SAC is a next step. So to consistently beat the Carrolls and Homesteads and Dwangers and Luers and Sniders, you need to be able to execute, not make mistakes.
And I want to go back to that Snider-Concordia game. What do you do if you're Tim Manigal this week? Do you throw away the tape of the Carroll game and be like, it got burned up. There was a problem recording it. We don't want to see that because it was an impressive performance any way you slice it from Snider. Covington in the first half was walking through guys. I mean, it was. What do you tell your team? Because obviously it's an even bigger test than you had with Homestead last week.
Yeah, it's troublesome with Snider because how do you want to keep the ball away from the Snider offense, right? So you run the ball, you try to chew up clock, but you can't run on Snider. And Marcus Moreau has been tremendous the first couple weeks for Concordia, yet you look at it and say, well, they're going to be able to limit him and shut him down. So then what does Concordia do? So it's very difficult right now to see what you can get going against that Snider defense and then slowing down that Snider offense. Christian Covington averaging 10.5 per carry. I mean, he's only carried the ball like 28 times and has already scored 7 touchdowns. I mean, he's got eye-opening stats right now. He's decent. But Snider hasn't had to have him, obviously, for 4 quarters. So at this point, you're looking at Concordia, and at this point, any team in the SAC and going, let's just survive Snider week at this point.
It could be something to watch throughout the season. Hopefully, I know Kurt Tippmann will try to keep those guys sharp all season long.
Yeah, and here's my thing with Snider, and I mentioned it today in the office, is this, I bet Kurt Tippmann really wished this was a year without 10 teams in the SAC because he's got 9 conference games. He's new in 6A, and you would think, man, I bet Coach Tippmann and that staff would really like to have scheduled a 6A team or 2. It doesn't even have to be a Carmel or a Ben Davis or a Center Grove, but like a Fishers, a Hamilton Southeastern, a Valpo. Really mix some teams in there that they're going to have to face in 6A because they can breeze 9-0 through this conference schedule, but going into a new 6A, having to face Penn again, obviously sitting there. Valpo looks really good. I mean, I guarantee you they wish they would have had those challenges in the regular season.
I think I agree with that from a depth perspective because you're going up against some of those 6A teams. You're not playing guys that are playing on both sides of the line as you will sometimes in the SAC. Just having that type of depth that even marginal 6A schools have.
Yeah,
it's refreshing to see a guy on the defensive line that can go after it every snap and having your offensive line go against a team with depth.
Yeah, definitely. And I think you look at it, maybe Woodland last year, maybe got a little complacent. Not saying Snider will do that, but sometimes you need those challenges in the middle of the year or the end of the season to really kind of bring you back down to earth. And I think that would really help Snider this season, especially if they keep rolling through the SAC like they're doing.